It happened on an ordinary Thursday. The kind of evening where the world felt muted, wrapped in the familiar hum of routine. Daniel and I were halfway through dinner when he said it. "You're too old for this, Lena." At first I thought he was joking. His tone was casual, almost indifferent, as he pushed the pasta around his plate. But something about the way he avoided my eyes told me he meant every word. Too old for what? For the short haircut I'd gotten last week? For the red lipstick I hadn't worn in years? Or maybe for the woman I was still trying to be? Vibrant, hopeful, unafraid of change, the silence stretched between us. Taut as wire, the sound of the clock ticking from the living room filled the space where affection used to live. I studied his face, once so familiar, now strangely foreign, and wondered when exactly we had stopped recognizing each other. Daniel had always been composed, the kind of man who carried confidence like a tailored suit. But lately, his laughter had grown thin, his touch mechanical. There were late-night calls, work trips that didn't add up, the faint trace of perfume that wasn't mine. I'd noticed it all, but denial had been easier. Until now, I set my fork down gently. "Too old?" I asked, my voice calm, though my pulse thundered in my ears. He sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Lena, I didn't mean it like that. We've changed. You've changed." There it was, the soft cruelty of honesty. I waited for him to say more, to take it back, to reach for me. But he didn't. In that moment, something inside me, a small, steady flame I'd kept alive through every argument, every disappointment, began to flicker. "I suppose we all do," I said quietly. He looked relieved, as if my composure had granted him permission to escape the discomfort of guilt. We finished dinner in silence. That night, after he fell asleep, I sat by the window and watched the city lights blur beneath the rain. My reflection in the glass looked older, yes, but also sharper, clearer. I realized then that what he saw as age was really something else, the evidence of everything I'd survived. I didn't cry, not yet, but as I traced the condensation on the glass, I knew something irreversible had shifted. Whatever story Daniel and I had been living together, it had just reached its turning point, and I had no idea what would come next. In the quiet aftermath of that dinner, the shape of my life began to reveal its cracks. Daniel and I had spent 12 years together, yet somehow I felt like a guest in my own marriage. Polite, careful, and always trying not to disturb the peace. We met when I was 29 at an art exhibit downtown. I was painting then, small pieces that rarely sold, but kept my heart alive. Daniel was charming, confident, and full of that contagious ambition I mistook for passion. He made me laugh until my ribs ached. When he asked me to marry him a year later, it felt like a promise of adventure. But love, I've learned, doesn't fade all at once. It erodes, slowly, quietly, until one day you wake up beside someone who feels like a memory. Over time, Daniel's compliments turned into polite observations, his laughter into sighs. My art supplies gathered dust while his career soared. He started working late, traveling more, talking less. When he did speak, it was often about numbers, deadlines, or colleagues whose names I'd never remember. Still, I stayed, not out of fear, but out of habit. The kind of devotion that confuses endurance with love. The night he called me too old replayed in my mind for days, looping endlessly like a cruel melody. I tried to convince myself he was stressed, that the words hadn't meant what they sounded like. But the truth clung to me, heavy and undeniable. He wasn't just drifting away, he was leaving. A week later, I found the confirmation. He had left his laptop open on the kitchen counter. The message blinked on the screen, almost mocking in its simplicity. "Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you." Her name was Hannah. Young, energetic, and new at his firm. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. as if the letters themselves were bleeding. When I confronted him, he didn't shout or even deny it. He just looked tired. "Lena," he said softly, "you deserve more than what we've become." It was strange. The way betrayal can sound almost merciful when spoken gently. That night, I packed a small suitcase, filled it with clothes, and the sketchbook I hadn't touched in years. I left our house without looking back, afraid that if I did, I'd lose the courage to go. The air outside felt cold, but alive against my skin. For the first time in a long while, I had no idea where I was going, only that I couldn't stay, and somewhere, beneath the ache of loss, a quiet realization stirred. Sometimes, walking away isn't the end. It's the first step toward remembering who you were before love taught you to shrink. The apartment I found was small, with peeling wallpaper and a window that overlooked the city's restless lights. It wasn't much, but it was mine. A quiet corner of the world where I could begin again. The first few nights were the hardest. The silence pressed against me like a weight, heavy and accusing. I filled it with music, tea, and late-night sketches that blurred between grief and release. Every brushstroke felt like an apology. To myself, to the years I'd lost waiting to be seen. That's when Ethan appeared. He was the building's maintenance worker, younger than me by several years, with dark hair that never seemed to stay in place, and hands that looked like they'd built entire lives. I met him the morning my kitchen light began to flicker. I'd been standing on a chair, screwdriver in hand, when he appeared in the doorway. "You planning to electrocute yourself? Or should I stop you now?" he said with a crooked smile. I laughed. A real startled laugh that felt strange after so long. "I'm capable," I replied, though I wasn't. He replaced the bulb easily, humming under his breath. As he worked, his eyes caught on the half-finished painting on my easel. A stormy seascape, wild and unfinished. "Yours?" he asked. I nodded. "It looks alive," he said, "like it's trying to escape the frame." No one had ever described my work that way before. Something in his voice, soft but sure, stirred a warmth I hadn't felt in months. Over the following weeks, I saw him often. He'd fix a leak, change a lock, or bring coffee from the cafe downstairs, by accident. We talked about everything and nothing. Art, music, bad movies, the absurdity of starting over. He never pried into my past, but somehow he understood the quiet ache beneath my words. His presence filled the empty spaces Daniel had left behind, not with grand gestures, but with steady kindness. Still, guilt followed me like a shadow. Part of me felt disloyal, even though my marriage had already ended in every way that mattered. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the window, Ethan stopped by to drop off a replacement heater. The room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of my lamp. He hesitated before speaking. "You seem lighter these days," he said. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." I met his gaze, calm, searching, honest, and for a heartbeat, I saw myself reflected there. Not the woman who'd been left, but the woman who'd survived, for the first time. I didn't look away, and in that stillness, something unnamed began to bloom. A month after I met Ethan, a letter arrived, plain envelope, Daniel's handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were divorce papers, and a brief note. "I hope this brings us both peace." Peace. The word looked too small for the wreckage it represented. Still, I signed my name that night, not with bitterness, but with a strange, quiet gratitude. The version of me who once waited for Daniel to come home no longer existed. The next morning, Ethan found me sitting by the window, the papers folded neatly beside my teacup. "You look like someone who just let go of a ghost," he said gently. Maybe I did. We spent that afternoon walking through the art district, a maze of colors and open skies. The air smelled of rain and coffee. I hadn't felt that alive in years. As we passed a gallery, something caught my eye. A familiar painting, my own, hanging among brighter, younger works. It was the stormy seascape I'd finished weeks ago. A small red sticker sat beneath it. Sold. I froze. Someone bought it. Ethan smiled. Someone saw what I see. His words carried a warmth that went deeper than flattery. It was the kind of recognition I'd once begged for, but never received. Standing there, I realized the truth I'd been circling for months. I wasn't broken because Daniel stopped loving me. I was whole because I'd learned to love myself again. That evening, Ethan walked me home. The city glowed behind us, each light a heartbeat. Inside, the apartment felt softer, alive with the scent of turpentine and rain. He hesitated at the door, his voice low. "I don't want to say the wrong thing," he murmured. "But you make it hard not to feel something real." I looked at him. This man who had entered my life so quietly, yet somehow repaired what I thought was beyond saving. "Then don't say it," I whispered. "Just stay." He did. When he kissed me, it wasn't the desperate collision of two lonely souls. It was steady, certain, like the closing of a long, painful chapter. In that moment, everything I'd lost stopped mattering. I wasn't someone's past anymore. I was my own beginning. Mornings feel different now. The light that filters through my window no longer exposes the emptiness I once feared. It softens everything it touches. I paint again, not to fill a void, but to celebrate the space I've reclaimed. Ethan often lingers nearby, coffee in hand, pretending to read while secretly watching me work. He says my concentration fascinates him, that I bite my lip when I'm lost in color. I tell him it's a bad habit. He insists it's beautiful. Sometimes when I catch him looking at me, I'm reminded of how gently love can return. Not like a storm, but like morning after a long night. It's been 6 months since the divorce finalized. Daniel moved to another city, or so I heard. There's no bitterness left between us, only a quiet understanding that some chapters are meant to end. I no longer revisit the night he called me too old. The words don't sting anymore. They've lost their power. In some strange way, they became the doorway to everything that came after. Ethan never tried to replace what I'd lost. He simply reminded me that I was never truly gone. With him, love feels simple. No performance, no conditions, no fear of being too much or too little. Just presence, just peace. Yet the real transformation didn't come from him. It came from me, from realizing that age doesn't diminish love's capacity. It deepens it. It teaches you that connection isn't found in youth or perfection, but in honesty, patience, and kindness. One evening, as we sat watching the sun dip behind the skyline, Ethan asked, "Do you ever wish you could change the past?" I thought about it, about all the tears, the silence, the betrayal that once defined me. Then I smiled. "No," I said softly. "If it hadn't broken, I wouldn't have known how strong it was." He reached for my hand, his thumb tracing lazy circles against my skin. A silent promise that whatever came next, we'd meet it together. Sometimes I think about how fragile beginnings can be, how easily they hide inside endings. If Daniel hadn't said those words, if my heart hadn't cracked open, I might never have discovered the life waiting on the other side of pain. Now, when I look in the mirror, I see a woman who isn't too old or too late. I see someone reborn. Because the truth is, love didn't save me. I saved myself. And that, more than anything, is the kind of ending worth beginning again.